As we heard earlier in the program, this year's budget was turned on its head, and the COVID-19 pandemic forced the Finance Minister to leave some things on the cutting room floor. Among them was reducing the cost of going to the doctor, and the other is tertiary fees. Grant Robertson told me there would be no second year of free tertiary fees.
Not in the immediate future. We've targeted that to the support we've just been talking about with respect to free trades training and apprenticeships in those critical industries. We'll have another look at that policy in the future. Obviously, the current first year free carries on for future students, but we will come back at a later date to whether or not we extend that out.
So gone for the moment, the second year.
We're not going to be able to bring it in 2021. We've decided the most important focus at the moment is those critical industries, getting people into training and apprenticeships there. In the future, we may be able to revisit that, but it won't be for the 2021 year.
And that was Finance Minister Grant Robertson. Meanwhile, the extension to the wage subsidy gets a thumbs up from the National Party leader, but there is a but. The scheme will run for another 2 months with beefed up criteria. Businesses have to show 50% losses due to coronavirus, up from 30%. It's part of a $50 billion COVID recovery package. But Simon Bridges says if he was Finance Minister, there'd be more for business, including a plan. I spoke to the National Party leader a short time ago and asked what he considered the best bit of the pandemic budget.
I liked a few bits and pieces, but I suppose the one I would highlight would be the extension of the job subsidy in a targeted way. At high level, I think that's absolutely the right thing to do.
Did it go far enough?
Look, in truth, I think we've got to look at the detail on that. I think you can make a case for other bits and pieces in it that they have their worth, I suppose.
Sorry to interrupt, it's an extension of 8 weeks up to $3.2 billion.
Yep. Yeah, and, I think we have to look at the detail of design and work out whether it's sort of pitched exactly right or it's a little too generous or not quite generous enough. I think that's good. I actually expected to see more in the way of a business support and a plan. I look at this overall, and I suppose what concerns me most is that we're taking a $50 billion problem and we're making it more like a $140 billion problem. That all has to be paid back. And I think inevitably under a Labour government that will mean more taxes, or if not, certainly a legacy of effectively mortgage on our children and our grandchildren.
In times of crisis, though, the national government has spent too and taken on more debt in order to keep the economy afloat.
Sure.
So how is this different?
I'm absolutely not making a case against debt. I suppose what I'm saying to you, though, is spending is the easy part. You do have to pay it back. And as I say, whether it's a $40 or $50 billion problem, that's a significant problem. GFC and earthquakes was about $50 billion of borrowing for the last national government. We didn't need to because it was at that level. Increased taxes, and we got back to a stronger economy from good economic management. Here, though, the borrowing is nearly 3 times that at $140 billion. And indeed, in terms of the $50 billion fund that Grant Robertson has put in place, $25 billion of that, he can't even say what he's spending it on in the lead up to the election. And so I sit there and say, yeah, there's the spending. That's the easy bit. It will mean a lot more debt. It's too much spending, I think, in that regard. And what is critically missing is the plan for jobs and growth. I just don't see that there.
OK, so then, let's hear your budget then, the alternative budget. What is the number one thing that you would have done that this government hasn't in this budget? Specifics.
So specifically, I think you'd see us, and it's not all money. We end the lockdown sooner and get to a position where, unless there's an incredibly good reason, people are back working, because it's so much easier when jobs is one of the top issues here to keep someone in a job than to see them on the dole queue and then try and get them back.
So you're saying go to level 1 now?
Pragmatic. Well, I think the levels thing is a misnomer in a sense. 4, 3, 2, 1, you can make your points. I think it's much more about actually what can people safely do in a 1 or 2 metre world. And that's the second bit of our plan. It's a 5-point plan. That's about ensuring that there's some pragmatism, if you like, a sense of can-do for businesses. So it's businesses creating sustainable jobs because they've got a confidence, they know the rules, they've got certainty. And again, I don't think we saw any of that detail here. We saw the spending, the borrowing and the hope, but not the plan.
So going to a different level isn't a budget. That's about the alert levels. So in terms of a budget that you would present as an alternative, name me one thing that you would have done today that this government did not.
Yep. We would have invested about $9.5 billion more into businesses directly, most of that in cash flowing them through the GST refund scheme I've already announced that we would want to do. That means up to $100,000 per business and a low interest loan attached to that for some of the bigger businesses. That would do much more for business, frankly, than anything we saw in this budget. I'd also be much more serious about accelerating depreciation or expensing for businesses, writing a lot more of that off, up to $150,000 per piece of equipment and so on. Because again, that's about getting the private sector doing it. I'll give you a very tangible example of the contrast here. In this budget, we saw well over $1 billion go into pest eradication. That may be a really good thing. I know people will feel passionately about that. I can get that. But in a sense, they're not the sustainable jobs, they're government jobs in the way that actually a SME or a larger business, because they feel confident about the future, because they've got those pragmatic rules, they know it's a pro-investment environment, them going out and creating long-term jobs. That's the way over a decade you have a much stronger economy and country with good livelihoods, and we just, I keep repeating it because it is important, we didn't see that plan for jobs and growth.
So the suggestion that you just made then about the cash grants and low interest loans, you announced that before the budget.
Yep.
So have you got anything new that you could add?
You will see more. I mean, I think in reality the opposition has the position of being able to see what Treasury's numbers are and going through them. But you will and can expect to see significant growth ideas and plans rolled out by National between now and the election, and you won't have to wait too long to get a sense of that. I mean, Lisa, I said in my speech in Parliament, and I say to you, I got 3 priorities for big spending: health, education, and then really just it comes down to one question: does it save jobs and create growth? That's where our priorities for investment would be. Lots of other nice to have things can be there, and you saw that in this budget, but our focus would be on those things I've just mentioned to you.
Okay, if we can get specific, would you have given helicopter payments, cash payments for people to go out and spend as a way of kickstarting the economy?
I have some scepticism of that. I mean, I do think the cash that's required is directed at businesses that have real problems. And yep, the wage subsidy is there, but the problem with the wage subsidy is it doesn't cover those other costs in the here and now that businesses have, whether it's rent, whether it's rates, whether it's other expenses. So I think you would have seen an approach where the cash and the assistance primarily went into businesses. Now, would there have been a families package in some way? Yeah, I think for National, we certainly, you will see that before the election. But helicopter cash, I have some scepticism. I don't know that just, getting a plasma TV, paying off some of the mortgage necessarily provides the targeted, clear stimulus we need at this time to create that jobs growth environment for the future.